Okay, and we're going to go live in three, two, one. Welcome to Retro Reprise. Thanks for joining us. I hope you guys had a great week. I hope you have an even better weekend. Welcome to Retro Reprise Live Episode 9. And if you're looking at the screen, you're seeing something a little different. That's because I've got a co-host. And
How y'all doing tonight?
my co-host is the bodacious Bill Benton. So, Bill, will you talk to people a little bit? Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I've been on YouTube for about 4 years now. Recently, I've just been doing this podcast here. Known this guy for like a long time now. How many years have we known each other now?
Maybe three or four. Has it been that
Yeah,
long?
it's kind of getting up there though. Yeah, he's got he's got this great show here, so I'm happy to be a part of the show right now. Old school retro gamer, big time fighting game fan. Love the history of video games. More or less, I'm a big fan of the stories and understanding how people grew up and played video games too. I think it's just fascinating how people can connect with stories. Like some people connect with sports or pop culture. I just like to connect with video games too, how people are.
And just to let you guys know, if you're watching from YouTube or from twitch.tv, you can join us in the chat. The chat room's open, so feel free to join in there. But tonight we have several topics that we're talking about. As you can see on the screen, we're going to start off with, we've got a review of Bloodstained. I've played through Bloodstained multiple times, got all the different things unlocked, and I'm going to do a review. I know people came out with a review like the day the game dropped, which is great, but I don't feel like that really gives you time to like learn the game and know the insides and outs. So we're going to do a review of Bloodstained. Bill's going to have a review of the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary collection on PS4.
Yep.
Yep, on PS4. And then we're going to get into current generation of consoles. I believe we're on the 8th generation. We're going to be getting into a conversation about those as well. And if we have a little bit more time, we'll be getting into some of the things that came out. The Atari VCS, the Pokemon Go game that's coming out with Pokemon Go Pikachu, and some other things as well. So we're going to get started with the first topic, and that's going to be the Bloodstained Curse of the Moon review. Now, you've got a chance to finally play some of it, haven't you?
Oh yeah. Played it for like 2 days straight now. It's one thing I like about the game though. Right away, you're right. It feels like a classic Castlevania game. And it's got like a really good, not just theme to it, but the monsters, like you said, just really feel reminiscent about the old school thing. What I like about those, all the branching paths that you can take, though. I mean, right off the bat.
Yeah, and to me that's more of a Rondo of Blood kind of style. Like you got a little bit of that in Castlevania 3 with some of the branching paths, but the way that it sort of forms together feels more like a Rondo of Blood type style in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But so I want to get into this as far as like, okay, so the gameplay is very, first of all, this is it's a budget title. It's $10. You can get it on just about any console. I've got it for both Steam and I've got it for my 3DS. You can get it for Switch, PS4. I think the Xbox One version comes out next week. So that was the only one that I think that was really delayed. But if you're an old school Castlevania fan, it's actually a really good game to get. Now, some of the other reviews that I've seen, people are praising everything about it. And I agree for the most part. This has the things that it's like a good nostalgia trip to a Nintendo game that never actually existed. So it's all the things that you want to remember about Nintendo, but none of the things that you don't. So there's not like, flashing pixels or something like that aren't formed correctly or anything like that because it's not reading correctly in the Nintendo. It's 16:9 aspect ratio. You really get the feel of they did a true 8-bit color palette, so the characters do look like they're out of a Nintendo game, which is really cool. Now, and it's not even really a complaint, It's the only thing that I feel like is a little bit of a downside is the music of the game. Now, I've heard a lot of people praise the music. It's not bad by any means. And it's by the same woman who did the music for the Castlevania games. But it doesn't seem to me to have that hook. That like a track like Vampire Killer from the original Castlevania really got you like hooked into the game, and I don't feel like this game has that as far as the soundtrack is concerned. Do you have like an opinion on the soundtrack at all?
Soundtrack's like it's not bad though, but the problem is though, like when you say you're playing the game, you have songs like that are going to be reminiscent to you when you're listening, when you're hearing it, and you know. It's like you said, it's not bad, but it's not great at the same time, though.
Well, I think it falls more into the Symphony of the Night style soundtracks, even though it is an 8-bit, chip tune type soundtrack. I think it would fit better in a bigger exploration type of game, and not so much in an action platformer like Curse of the Moon is. So again, like I said, the music is not bad. It's not at any point where you're like, oh, this is grating, I've got to turn it off. But I just don't feel like it's got the hook. The way I explained it in my live stream of it was that I think they should have gotten the dude who did Shovel Knight to write a couple of tracks. Get like that first level track in there, because that dude seems to really write hooks and get you like into the game right away.
Oh, exactly. That's a great reference right there for soundtrack.
But overall, I think Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. I keep on wanting to call it Circle of the Moon because that's a Castlevania title. Curse of the Moon. Overall, it's a really great game, and for $10, I don't think anybody could go wrong. Even if you're somebody who may not necessarily be into retro gaming, if you're just kind of curious about it, it's worth the $10 on whatever console, whatever computer you're going to play it on. I think it's worth getting the game. I would like to see more sequels to this particular Bloodstained. What's funny was that this started off as just sort of a stretch goal. This wasn't actually designed to be like the big game to get people into it. But for those of us who are old school platforming Castlevania fans, this was exactly the kind of thing that we needed. We just needed to have a good game like this, and I really want to see this do well. I think it is doing well because that's a lot of what my YouTube feed is right now, is a lot of Curse of the Moon stuff. So I'm hoping that this really takes off, and I'm hoping we'll get some more sequels, especially at the $10 price range. You can't really go wrong with it.
Oh yeah, especially too. And for a $10 game, it feels like a very short game, but truth be told, I mean, you've beaten it several times, right? And and you can tell definitely it has a lot of replay value to it.
Yeah, it does. So there's two settings in the game. You have Veteran, which is for those of us who like the challenge of Castlevania, or you can play Casual. And Casual is for those of you who've always wanted to get into Castlevania, but the difficulty curve is maybe a little too high for a lot of people. And so I understand that. So I played my first playthrough, and what I have on the live stream is me playing on the Veteran difficulty. And that adds so much challenge to the game that it does lengthen the game quite a bit. Because I've gone back and played it on the Casual, and I can just kind of zip through it that way. So it's kind of cool to have those two options, because if you still play on Casual, and you can still beat the game, you still get the different versions of the story. And there are several different versions. So the way I've also explained this game is that the first game playthrough that you do really isn't the game. The when you unlock Nightmare mode is really when you get into the game and really start getting into the use of the different characters. And then there's a whole nother way to play the game where you actually end up killing the bonus characters that you get along the way and collecting other items. And Sengetsu, the character that you start off with, he ends up getting more powers, and so he plays as a different character altogether, and that unlocks another mode that unlocks ultimate mode. So with ultimate mode, you get Sengetsu with all the powers that you collected, and then you can get the other three characters along in the game, and then you just keep on playing the game. It's really fun. And Sengetsu with the additional bonus powers, it's extremely fun, but then you realize when you go back to play the original game that how stripped of powers he actually is. And so you kind of get used to being able to do like a double dash and a double jump and all sorts of cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. And the story though to it, is really interesting. It doesn't have the Dracula theme anymore, but you gotta admit though, Dracula is kind of played out. I mean, it goes together with with Castlevania as well as anybody else. You expect Dracula in a Castlevania game, but this offers like demons and whatnot. And what I like about the fact is that maybe other iterations of the game we might have different demons, different people down the road as far as like maybe a final boss or even in the grand scheme of things, just kind of like just the tip of the iceberg as far as like villains are concerned.
Yeah. It still sets itself in a very gothic setting, which is cool. And there are vampires in the game. There's kind of references to other Castlevania characters. Like there's one of the bosses is this lady who's taking a bath in blood, who is Elizabeth of Bathory, I think is the original person that it's based off of. But in Castlevania Bloodlines, Elizabeth is Dracula's niece, and who's kind of the driving force of bringing Dracula back in that game. And so it's a reference to her. So it's kind of cool how they've tied everything in together, but they've still been able to keep it separated enough to make it not a Castlevania game, but in the same vein of Castlevania.
Mm-hmm. And who was this person in real life that you said it was based off? This is this lady that bathed in blood. Is this a true story or what?
Yeah,
I never heard this before.
So Elizabeth of Bathory is a woman who she was wasn't a royal exactly, but she was a highborn woman in a family, and she believed that she would have people killed, and she would bathe in their blood because she thought that would keep her young.
Damn.
So it's based off. It's kind of like Vlad Tepes. So like Dracula is based off of the same. So like it's like Dracula. So Vlad Tepes, who's really Dracula, Count Dracula. Vlad the Impaler. He's a real person. Elizabeth of Bathory is a real person. But they were in Castlevania style. They tied those two together because you have these two kind of. I have a whole other thing on Dracula. Like I used to read up on Dracula, like the real dude, Vlad Tepes, and like I studied a bunch of stuff about him and what he was involved with and why he was the way he was. And I actually have a friend who's from Romania, and when I was talking to him about stuff, he was talking about how Dracula, Vlad Tepes, was actually a hero, and he's a hero in their land. And when you read about all the messed up stuff that people did to his family and him, like you start to understand why he went sort of the psychopath way that he did. So it was Constantinople and another area were fighting a war, and basically Wallachia, the Transylvania area, was a very small piece of land between those, and both of those different warring countries always kept on fighting not only each other, but they would also be invading his land, his family's land, and keep on like messing with him. So like they killed his dad, and then his brother took over, and they buried his brother alive, and Vlad Tepes had to go into hiding. And then he came back years later, and he just was like, all right, I'm desiccating everything. So he started, putting people up on spikes and stuff like that. And he really was, as far as like he was really smart in the way he handled war and things like that. And he would put people up on spikes and hang them up on spikes to like intimidate the other like invading countries. So when you really like look at it, like he saved their region several times over and had to go into hiding, and there's way too much to get into, but it's a really incredible story. But Elizabeth of Bathory is a real person who would I think it was just virgin women if I'm remembering correctly, and I could be wrong about that, but she would have them killed, drain their blood in a bathtub, and she would take a bath in their blood.
Oh, that's just the creepiest thing I ever heard, man. That's just, you don't even put my toe in that thing. You know what I mean? No. Oh, hell no.
Hey, man, that's what when you get into the old ways, people just believing whatever they want to with no scientific evidence or proof. That's what they did.
Yeah, I know. Stuff was crazy back then. Jesus. It's messed up.
But overall, what I'm going to recommend everybody play Bloodstained: Curse of the Moon. If you haven't gotten into it yet, spend the $10. I've played it on excuse me. I played it on the 3DS. I really enjoy it on the 3DS because I like to move around and I have other things to do. But some of the things that makes the game a little bit easier is that there's save states. So every time you start a new level, it automatically saves to that level. So you're not even with the veteran difficulty, it's still not as hard as a traditional Castlevania game. Even though I think Castlevania games did have a password system, I never used them. But yeah, I think this is a good game for anybody who has any kind of nostalgia and they really want to get into a classic style Castlevania game. I'm going to say Bloodstained: Curse of the Moon is a good one to get.
Definitely, especially like you turned me onto the game though. For $10, it's a great bargain. Here's the thing though too, it's not just like, oh, it's a cool game for $10. It's like I got it a few days ago, and when I get off, hours before I get off work, I daydream about going home and playing that game. That's how fun it is. You really look forward to going home, booting it up, and playing it. So it's definitely a must buy for $10. It's probably one of the best $10 you're going to spend this week.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to our next review. Bill's going to take this one over. We're going to talk about the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection. You can take it away, man.
All right, guys. So Street Fighter, if you know anything about video gaming history, this really started the video game fighting craze in the early 90s, though. But few people know that actually the 30th Anniversary Edition, actually Street Fighter came out in 1987. And actually wasn't that huge of an arcade game, but it was huge enough to actually. The beauty of this collection is you get all these Street Fighter games. You're going to get Street Fighter 1. You're going to get the multiple versions of Street Fighter 2. You got Hyper Fighting, Super Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo. You're going to get Championship Edition. Some people call it version of Rainbow. You're going to get the Alpha Series. Alpha Series 1, 2, and 3. You're going to get Third Strike series, all versions of those ones. And here's the thing about it, though. They used basically like a simulator, real arcade boards for it. So whatever version you're using, there's no difficulty setting. These are basically for the hardcore fan of Street Fighter, because you're going to get a real arcade experience. You're going to be able to have these filters in it too, which is amazing. You can go from arcade, you can go to TV screen. You can actually turn out. I like to play in the original mode for TV screen. It's going to look a lot better there. But the challenge is there, and for the best collection out there, it's you can get it for $40, and for the pre-order, you get a downloadable code that go on whatever service you have, Xbox Live or PlayStation Network, and you can actually download Ultra Street Fighter 4, which is a great deal because I believe the game's going for $20 by itself. So for $40, if you pre-order the game and you got it though, the value alone is worth it. If you've never played Street Fighter games before, this is a great way to start though. And it's not the pure fact. I'm sorry about it. It's not about the pure fact of just playing a fighting game just to fight. These characters all have amazing stories, and they all kind of intertwine with each other. It's just an amazing story to get into though. It really is though. It's I would definitely recommend this to anybody who's never played Street Fighter. It's going to be tough, but it's going to be great. The online mode alone is just phenomenal. You're going to play, and it's really tough though too. I ain't gonna lie. I have not yet won my match. I have over 20 matches. I have still not won yet though, but it is still probably one of the funnest games I've played in Street Fighter. And I like this game more than Street Fighter 5 when Street Fighter 5 first came out. So this is a lot better.
Now, I know that there was an HD remix of Super Street Fighter 2 that came out several years ago. Now, does it have that version of it as well? Because I know, like on the On the Switch, they have like a
I'm,
remix version of it as well. Did they conclude that one, or did they stick with just the original?
they stuck with just the original arcade boards. So basically, no, they're not going to have like the HD remake that was, which was did great art from the artists that do the Undyne comics. They were in charge of doing the sprites on that. And this is kind of nice. So you're not also not going to get Street Fighter EX series. That was mostly the third. They're attempting to go in like a 3D fighter arena. So these are going to be like the exact boards that you're going to have in the arcade, especially if you grew up and you really want the authentic Street Fighter 2 version at home. This is the way to go. If you want the authentic Alpha series at home, this is also what you're going to have to go with though. A lot of times there's going to be ports, there's going to be collections that brought out. Um, this one really does it. I mean, it nails it too. It really does. If you have a fight stick, it really drives home the fact that wow, I really do have the ultimate Street Fighter collection.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Um, Now, are there any kind of like bonuses, like artwork or anything that's included with the game?
See, that's the cherry on top of this thing, man. Is there is so much bonus. There's so much history in the bonuses too. The character selection, you're going to get a detailed about every character that's ever in the game. This is stuff you don't have to unlock. This is stuff that's available right away off the bat. You can find out your favorite character, a little background story about the person, the first time they ever appeared in the Street Fighter series. You're going to find yourself uh, kind of amazed by, they were in the Street Fighter series long before. Now, the timeline of Street Fighter is really, really off, though. Some Street Fighter games, even though they're number five takes place actually before three, and so on from there. So it kind of explains a little bit of that, though. But the coolest feature, though, is like I said before, Street Fighter 2 was the one that everybody remembers, and everybody will probably want to buy this collection for us because of those memories. And it has a lot of details about the making of Street Fighter 2. It was originally called Street Fight. Street Fighter almost became a game called Street Fighter 89, which actually became Final Fight. And now a lot of the Final Fight characters are in the Street Fighter universe as well. But it has like the earlier characters you would have picked though for Street Fighter 2. It was supposed to be on an island, is what it was supposed to be. It's supposed to be 7 stages on an island. It had all kinds of crazy modes in it. It even had handicap modes on it where you have to fight 2 fighters at once. And it had some really interesting characters. You had like Gaio was like this special ops assassin with like an IQ of 220. He's supposed to be able to read his opponent's minds. Ken and WiiU wasn't in it. They had this one guy, I can't remember his name, is basically he wanted to prove that Japanese karate was the best karate out there. Chung Li was actually a Kempo fighter. Actually, it wasn't even Chung Li, it was Xing Chen. And basically, they're all like really bad, cheap versions of what they actually became out to be. And the thing is, though, when you flip through the artwork for all this stuff, it's not like they tell a little story. It's like reading a nice online book about how the game slowly developed, how they figured out the endings at the end for certain characters, like different drawings and different outcomes for the ending, which is really cool, though. I mean, there's other Street Fighter games that offered artwork like that before, but never a detailed story that goes with it. So, I mean, just reading through that alone is like a pure game, pure fun. It's just, and the nice thing, too, you don't have to unlock a bunch of crazy stuff just to look at it. It's going to be there right away for you.
So how would you rate the controls for it, for the different games and stuff?
Controls are pretty good, though. And what I like about the controls in this, because you got so many Street Fighter games, if you want to map your buttons on the control pad or on a fight stick, you map it for one, and you're good for the rest of the games, too. You don't have to just, if you like your light punch or heavy punch or whatever in a certain area on the control pad versus, what they normally are. A lot of people don't like the pure fact that their heavy punch and their heavy kick are going to be the R1, R2 respectfully. So you set it for one game, and it's going to be good for the rest of the games, too. You don't have to jump in and adjust every time you start up a new game in there, which is really good, though.
That's cool. Well, this sounds like it's really the definitive collection for Street Fighter stuff. Because I have, I think I have like the 20th anniversary. I've also got the Alpha collection, which is really cool. But those are separate discs on their own. So you're getting pretty much everything, like you said, with the exception of the EX series. And really, I don't know too many people who would be super familiar with the EX series. So it sounds like it's really like sort of the definitive collection for Street Fighter.
Oh, definitely. And like I said, it's like really good Oda fans as far as like being let down with Street Fighter V not having a lot of content when it first came out. There's no arcade mode for it. There didn't really offer like a ton of fighters for what you would expect from that franchise at that point in time for number five. And then you get this version of it, and it's just like, thank you, Capcom. Really, just this is what we really need for a 30th anniversary edition.
All right, excellent. So, would you recommend this for people to pick up?
Definitely, yeah. If you're a fighting game fan, then obviously you heard Street Fighter. Street Fighter fan, this is definite must pick up, must get though for the collection. For the online mode alone, if you're really big into competitive fighting games, this is a great arena to join into. It's going to be a tough one though, but the beauty about playing Street Fighter is the harder the matches, the better you will get at this game. You're never going to play Street Fighter the same way twice, and this is a huge reason why I've been a fan of it ever since I was a little kid. That you will get better at it. Trust me. It's not going to be easy at first, but it's going to be. You're going to get really good, and then you're going to get to the point where you can almost just show off to your friends how good you get, man. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, excellent. So, sounds like a Street Fighter 30th anniversary collection is good to go. You said $40. Xbox One, PS4 is available for PC too.
I don't know if it's available for PC though. It's pretty good though. It's not a flawless game by any means. There's a few things I wish they could have done for the game. Just more or less for a fanfare is for Street Fighter the first game you can only play as Ryu, and I always dreamed of just having a version of the original Street Fighter, which doesn't control well to begin with. So this is like kind of like a little kind of like nitpicking at little things where, but I always want to play as the characters you were fighting against, like Sagat and Gen and all those people. So
Yeah, that's one of those games. I really wish they would. I know that's what the Alpha series was supposed to do, was sort of like replace Street Fighter One. But I would like to have seen them remake Street Fighter One, where you had selectable characters and some better controls. Maybe be able to actually pull off fireballs and stuff like that.
yeah,
If you've never played the original Street Fighter, it's actually not a very good game. I had the benefit of playing it back when it was in the arcades. So they had a giant punch button and a giant kick button. And you're supposed to pound those buttons. And depending on how hard you pounded those buttons determined how hard, like whether it was like a light punch to a fierce punch or a light kick to a fierce kick. And so it was like super hard to control. And apparently I read up on this years ago, but like those big buttons would get jammed and people would like hurt their wrist and stuff like that by like pounding on the buttons. So they eventually switched over to the 6-button layout with the light, medium, and heavy punch and kick attacks. But I got to play the actual arcade where it had like the big buttons that you had to pound on.
It's crazy too though, because like you said before, the game was not really all that fun, and it barely even got a sequel. It really barely got a sequel. So
Yeah, it was
amazing
going to
how
turn
things.
into. Yeah, it was. They were really looking at Final Fight to be the official sequel to Street Fighter for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. It goes to show it's sometimes the sequel's way better than the original. Case
Yeah.
in point, this one was good though.
Oh yeah, Street Fighter revolutionized the arcades. I mean, I credit Street Fighter 2 for keeping arcades around that much longer than what they would have been if they were still just like beat 'em ups and space shooters and whatnot. I don't think we would see arcades last as long as they had. I really think that the competitive fighting games, because I mean, once that took off, there was a ton of them, and I think that's what kept
Oh yeah.
arcades. I think that kept arcades around for at least another decade or so.
Mhm. Oh, definitely for sure though. And like you said though, like there was nothing there for a long time, and beat 'em ups were the closest thing you probably get to a fighting game, other than Karate Champ, and that was another fighting game that was a little tricky to play too.
You know what, I got really good at Karate Champ, with getting the different combinations with the controllers. So I got
Oh
pretty
yeah.
good of it at the arcade, but like I don't have a good arcade port of it, and so there's really no way to play it without two joysticks. So
Oh
so
yeah.
if you play like if you get like some sort of emulated version, and you're trying to do it with your buttons, it's not going to work. You have to just play the game with the two control sticks to actually get how to play it. But once you learn how the system works, it's actually a really fun game. But yeah, it's got one of those learning curves. It's just a little bit too high, and you know, when you're pumping in quarters into a cabinet, it can be a little difficult.
Oh yeah.
So anything else you want to add to Street Fighter?
Other than that, though, you know, as far as wishing to play with original other characters, I'd like to see another collection. Doesn't really have to be a 30th anniversary collection, but I'd like to see maybe someday with some of the other fighters that came out there with Street Fighter. I know they made a Darkstalkers collection, though, but I'd like to see a lot of them ported over to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Even if it's a digital version, I'd like to see that with modern day multiplayer online mode, you know, because a lot of these games are really made to be played with friends.
Oh yeah, Darkstalkers would be great. One of my, I'll just throw this in here. One of my favorite games was it Street Fighter versus SNK 2? Like
Knights of the Millennium.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, that game just feels natural as far as like pulling off all the moves and everybody there. And I would love to see that get. I don't know if I want to see it remade, but I'd like to see that one get released again for everybody to get into. Because if you haven't played it, there's I think it's there's a Dreamcast version and then there's a PlayStation 2 version that's out there, and they're kind of getting pricey these days. That's kind of a sought after game. But
oh yeah, there's a.
Oh, you can go.
Oh,
ahead.
Go ahead. No, there's a they're starting to get pricey though. But you can find them fairly pretty cheap though. If you want a disc only copy, those are the best way to go. If you're a person who wants to play it. If you're a collector, obviously you want the case maybe complete. But if you want to play it, a disc copy by itself is going really cheap right now.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. But yeah, for me personally, that's like my favorite Street Fighter. Even though that's a Street Fighter and SNK crossover, like that's still like my overall favorite, because the system that they put into place there just makes sense to me. Like I can just fall into that one, where the other ones I have to kind of learn. Like with Street Fighter 3, it's a completely different like beast compared to Street Fighter 2. The way the system works, you have parrying, the combos are completely different.
Oh yeah, and like I said before, these are the arcade hardware versions of the game. The different version, like if you play Street Fighter on the home version back then of Street Fighter 2, they're going to be a lot easier for even on the medium difficulty mode. They're going to be a lot easier than the arcade mode, because the arcade mode is basically there to take your money back in the day. That's why they're so tough, you know. But it was a real accomplishment to go ahead and beat Bison at the end of Street Fighter 2. And then a lot of people, and even myself, though, it's just like one of those pivotal moments in video gaming history that you feel like you accomplished something, you know. So it is going to be a lot harder. Like I said, there's really no difficulty you can mess around with. But, you know, the fact is, you know, that's how it was back then. You know, they were made to take your money.
Oh, yeah. If you could beat Street Fighter 2 on one quarter, you were a master back then.
Yeah. It always has like the weird thing is they always have a little learning curve. Like you can always be like the first two opponents pretty fast. Then that third opponent you get, and I always hated it. Like if I always said I'd play Chun-Li as my third opponent, because I know Chun-Li would just whoop my ass constantly. So,
well, I have several collections. I think Capcom and Midway is another one that I have, and they have some interviews that are really interesting where they talk about how the arcade designers, they basically designed all arcades to basically give you like 2 minutes of gameplay, and then whatever you were playing. So Street Fighter falls into this as well, because you got your two matches, and then by your third match, the difficulty just seemed to like skyrocket. So you were gonna get your butt kicked. But that's the way arcade games were designed, to give you about 2 minutes of gameplay, and then increase the difficulty so much that you'll have to put in another quarter to play.
Mm-hmm.
But Street Fighter,
they always give you play.
But Street Fighter doubled that by giving you 2-player competitive, and so I mean those machines were just raking in cash at that point in time, because you could have one person playing a one-player game, and then somebody would come along and enter in at any time, and a new challenger would be in the match, and then one of them would win, one of them would go away. So those machines were just making money inside and out, just back and forth.
Oh yeah, and nothing like that was the ultimate jerk move back in the day. Let's say you played Street Fighter 2 back in the arcade, and then you're doing pretty good. You're on your sixth fight already. You're doing really good. Single quarter, you're on your sixth guy, and then some guy comes over, throws a quarter in on the other side, doesn't even say anything. Starts the game up, then you have to fight him, okay? So you got to fight this guy again. So then if you win the match, you go on. But if you don't, it's like you feel like people will take your spot in line in Street Fighter. It was brutal back in the arcade. And that's the reason why a lot of people don't understand. Like, arcades were almost like a rival turf, Like, how dare you come over and play me in Street Fighter when I'm in the middle of a game? You just use used to break out constantly. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I always knew
it's like there was etiquette in the arcade back in the day, and there was just a huge unwritten book of rules, So that's what you get. I mean, we have arcades nowadays, but like I said, most arcades are either free to play or you prepay, or even nowadays where we're adults now, we can have, I got like a whole freaking can full of quarters I can just throw in, so.
Yeah, I always knew that I was going to get my ass handed to me because I'm a WiiU player. Like, I've always been a WiiU player, and but I always have a hard time defending against Ken players, and especially at Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Like, Ken was just almost OP in that game, and but yeah, there was always somebody who'd come along and play as Ken and just whip my ass, and I could never get all the defenses together to protect myself. So I'd always get kicked up by Ken, even though I was like one boss away from beating the game.
So even to this day, though, I'm like a huge fan of watching salty players from Evo that play Street Fighter, because a lot of times people still get pissed off if they lose a match on Street Fighter, even on the world's biggest stage for the championship. It's just fun to play because nothing else out there in fighting games has that kind of history. But most of all, it's just the people that play the games are characters themselves. Justin Wong, Daigo, Mike Brown. They're just really interesting people, and they're it's just I can't say enough good stuff about the game. I really can't. I'm not like somebody that likes to give a perfect score to video games. So if I'd rate it out of 5, I'd put it down as 4.5 stars.
Oh, cool. All right, so I think we're going to move on to the next topic here, which is 8th generation consoles. And so you had a real specific kind of topic with this. So I'll let you kind of start it off, and we'll have our discussion with this as far as what you wanted to talk about with the current generation of consoles.
And this is great, though, too, because I want to see what everybody else's opinion is on this one, though. What is the cultural impact of the 8th generation leaves on pulp culture? You know what I mean? As far as the last generation, I really tie that to is when online multiplayer became really good. That's when everybody started getting really good broadband internet. It was more cheaper, it's more available in most places, out in the country and whatnot. And that's when the Call of Duty craze kind of really started in the last generation. And then the online mode really kicked into gear. And what does this generation really bring to it, though, other than the fact that there's a lot of remakes for most modern consoles? For all the video games that get released every month, I feel like there's way too many remakes out there. Even games that were only a few years old, like Dragon's Dogma came out, I want to say back in 2014 and maybe 2013. I can't really remember. But now last year they actually did a remake version of it. And it's a good game, don't get me wrong. But I feel like the market's just not full of original games for the system that came out. Now, God of War looks beautiful on the PlayStation 4, but God of War came out on PlayStation 2. What games for this current generation debuted on these newer systems? Games like Cuphead, I understand, really brought the gaming to the market too. But what games do you think probably actually it will define this generation that came out and debuted? We'll look back and be like, oh yeah, that PlayStation 4, man, that game came out for it, man, it blew everything away, nothing like it before,
Well, I'm in a different boat because I am primarily a retro gamer. So I don't actually
Mhm.
own any of these consoles, but I have paid attention over the past few years as to what's going on with a lot of them. I think that we're looking at Overwatch, PUBG, uh, more of those types of games that are really more defining for this generation. But from my perspective, we've seen a lot of issues with the current generation of consoles, and some of that has to do with the consoles themselves. The other part of it really has to do with um, game companies like EA. So with the consoles themselves, because we're talking about PS4, Xbox One, and primarily talking about the Wii U. Now each one is, so the Wii U is kind of its own separate thing. We can get into that in a minute, but with the consoles, we've had something kind of odd with these where we've got a mid generation upgrade with like the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X. With one of the primary things being that the original PS4 and Xbox One, um, they weren't really set up for like 4K or something like that. Which 4K televisions were already out by the time those consoles were actually released, and it just didn't seem like the either Microsoft or Sony really planned out well for those consoles to be able to grow with the television market. Because 4K televisions are becoming more affordable. More people are buying 4K televisions. It would just make sense that these consoles would have already been set up 4K capable. But if you want to do that, then you have to get a PS4 Pro or an Xbox One X in order to take place on that. So that's one side of it to me. It just doesn't seem like these consoles were set up or anticipated the market very well. The other thing that's sort of the big one for me is this has been sort of the year or the generation of loot crates, and
Yeah.
like kind of bad, like we got some bad DLC sort of towards the end of the Xbox 360 PS3 era, but it seemed to really like blow up during this console generation. So like I said, from my aspect, from outside looking in, just kind of listening and watching and paying attention to what's going on, to me there seems to be a lot of negativity with these consoles, and part of it is, like I said, the games that are coming out, and some of it is sort of the way that these systems came out. Now the Wii U again is a completely different beast because that really was on Nintendo really trying to market the Wii, and this they were so successful with the Wii, they really thought that they couldn't go wrong with introducing a secondary version of the Wii, and that's what the Wii U ended up being, even though it's a completely different console. So that's sort of my takeaway from this. What do you think about that?
Well, I think about, as far as like you said about, a lot of disappointments for certain things. Like, you know, to me, the biggest disappointment of this generation was VR, because when VR came out, you really felt like you're going to get a real immersive video game style we had. And VR has been around for a long time, and it's looked everything from god awful to beautiful. And the thing is, though, when you actually try VR, it gives you a sense like you're in a game, but at the same time, you still feel like you don't have that 100% immersive feel to it. You know what I mean? I
Well,
think, and the peripherals that I understand, I think VR outside console gaming uh, will eventually happen to the point where you have a really good immersive feel to it. But as far as this generation to launch that stuff, I think they tried too early to push that kind of hardware. I mean, they give you like a taste of it, but they don't really give you, a real feel to it. And that's the reason why I think VR games really don't sell that well. And just, to me, it's not worth the money getting VR. I tried it, I experienced it. They had a little setup at GameStop, and it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel like.
Now, the last time I played a VR game was probably the early 2000s in Las Vegas. They had a VR Pac-Man game. So I'm not a good judge on VR. But that is one thing that I wanted to touch on, was that because I think PlayStation really embraced VR. I don't know how much the Xbox One embraced VR. And what I've been thinking about as far as the VR is concerned, I'm wondering if the jump to VR is kind of like the jump that we had from, let's say, 16-bit games, 16-bit 2D games to the 32-bit and 64-bit three-dimensional games where we started using polygons. Because when you take a look at a game, I'll use Mortal Kombat for a good example of this. So when you looked at Mortal Kombat 3, it was a good-looking game. It played really well. They had gotten to a point where they had really started to master doing the digitized graphics from the actors. They incorporated running. They incorporated combos. The game was real smooth and it was really good looking. And then you got Mortal Kombat 4. And I personally enjoy Mortal Kombat 4, but it by no means like lives up to the level of what Mortal Kombat 3 had laid out when it had come out. So I'm wondering if our current jump from our current console generation, where we can have, you know, we'll say 4K with these sort of mid-console generation stuff, to going into VR, I'm wondering if we're not having that same transition period. Because honestly, looking back at the consoles for me, like I had a hard time making that adjustment. Like I know there's a lot of fans of N64, and this is something to keep in mind too. With this current console generation, this is someone's first generation. Mm-hmm. There's some kid out there that this was the first time that they played video games, and one of these consoles was their first game situation that they grew to, and so they're gonna love it. This is going to be a piece of nostalgia for them 20 years down the road for them. So, but for the rest of us who've been kind of around for it, I think they don't really live up to what a lot of people's expectations were. So I have a hard time kind of placing the barometer on a lot of this. So I am kind of curious if VR will continue on, or if it's going to go the way of motion controls. So if it does continue on, this is just sort of that odd, weird 32-bit polygon era that we had for games. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, and the thing is, I'm not against VR, but in the grand scheme of every video game player, there's a lot of people that just really enjoy sitting down and playing a video game. And I think most players will. It's kind of like when the Wii came out with motion controls, you know? A lot of people liked it. I was so amazed when Zelda came out. I was like, man, I get to walk around my room. I get to be Zelda, man, swinging the sword around. I thought it was going to be so much fun. It didn't really live up to that kind of hype at all. But, you know, with the VR, I think if you really want to satisfy the VR people, that's going to have to be its own separate gaming console itself, you know? I've seen videos on them where they have like these little track pads where you can walk around in a circle, you can carry weapons and whatnot, and you have the full thing, which obviously is going to be super expensive to own something like that. But to have a console pretend it's a VR system, you know, the console's got to have the hardware and it's got to have the muscle to really do VR. And I think the thing is, though, we don't have enough VR players. I hope someday there will be, because I do want to have. I think that would be the pinnacle of gaming, is to put yourself in a video game, you know?
Well, do you think that VR is going to be one of those things that takes off, or is it going to be like motion controls? Because the problem with motion controls was that you end up with about maybe 15, 20 minutes of gameplay, because honestly, as an adult, you get home from work, you're exhausted already. You want to play a video game. Yeah. Do you want to sit there and waggle a controller around, or do you want to sit down with a controller in your hand and play a game that you're looking at a screen, where you can kind of relax and you know, kind of solve your puzzles at the same time without having to be physical about it? So that's what I'm kind of curious about, is with VR the way it is now, because I have, like I said, I haven't experienced it. I'm outside looking in. Is it the same experience that we initially had with motion controls, where you get maybe about 15, 20 minutes of enjoyment, and then you're kind of done? You're kind of tired and you want to just relax for the rest of the time?
It all depends on the game. If you have a decent first person view game, it's not that bad. If you have, there's a lot of shovelware right now for it, and that's the problem. Is I don't think they probably have a lot of decent developers making a good quality game you want to sit down and play VR for a long time. If I think VR would be perfect for a Skyrim game. In all honesty, I mean that'd be a lot of fun, especially if you can look around 360 in your house and kind of even with a control pad in your hand, you still feel pretty immersive though. But like you said. That's a game you're going to play for hours on end. Like when you start Skyrim up, you're not going to sit and play for 20 minutes. You're going to play for several hours. And would you feel comfortable doing that the whole time? Second thing, too, are you going to knock stuff around in your house, too? Because if you really want to get the full experience other than just sitting on the couch, and just moving around, you got to have the room to do it. Or you got to have some kind of capacity or something for it, though. So I think VR controls, to answer your question, VR controls will still be around except they're going to be a very, very small market. They're going to be in the same market where rich people have like those little racing simulators with the screen built up and the actual steering wheel and the gas pedals for the racing games and the hydraulics make your car move with the thing. I think it's going to be more of a high-end rich person's peripheral than it will be. And I think they're going to do it right, and I think that's the kind of market they got to shoot for in order for it to advance. I think once it advances to the point where they get it right. They get really good VR games coming out. They make them fun to play for more than 20 minutes and for a couple hours. Then I say move them over to the console market. But don't make the console market, you're like, okay, this is as good as it gets, because it's not as good as it gets right now,
Well, and what I'm kind of curious about is how much longer the console market's going to be. So we kind of touched on the Wii U just a little bit. But I mean, obviously, what people are more interested in, and this is even myself, if I were to pick up a new console right now, it'd most likely be a Switch. And I'm wondering if we're going to see Sony and maybe even Microsoft go to a portable type system, very similar to the Switch, where you could dock it at home, play on the television, and then pick it up and take it with you. I'm wondering if we're going to see consoles go in that direction or if we're going to see them go into a VR direction.
Yeah, and I think when they launched the Xbox 360, remember they tried to have like you can play your Xbox, no, not 360, but the Xbox One. You can play it on like tablet, like multi-service thing, like you could take it anywhere with you as you go. And that never really took off. It tried to be like everything in one system, and it never really did. Like you said before, I think mobile gaming is probably going to just eventually become the console, and like what they did with the Switch right now. I think that's a great idea. Everybody thinks to themselves, "Oh, it's just a handheld," but no, it's really it's a home console too. But you got to do it right though. And the thing is, though, I'd be worried about though. You got to make it strong because I see Switches that are, easily dropped. People get careless. I get careless. I've broken 5 or 6 phones in my life. Never on purpose, but it's one of those things that happen. And the thing is, though, you spend a lot of money on a console, and you would hate to drop her for something bad to happen to it. And the thing is, though, if I break it when I'm out and about and I can't play it when I get home, that's it's horrible. It's
Yeah, and what I mean, there was some things about the Xbox One crossover that I liked. Now, again, I don't have an Xbox One, but if any game that I bought on my Windows 10 PC, I could cross that over to the Xbox One if I chose to. So essentially, you could buy stuff on Steam for cheap and then play it on your Xbox One. And I really like that idea. And so I'm wondering if we're going to see maybe better integration or a console or something that would kind of bridge that gap, maybe to where you don't have to necessarily take the home console with you, so in case you do damage the portable console, that you could take it with you.
See, I like to see. I'm a big fan of the evolution of the PlayStation controller from the original PlayStation controller all the way up to the 4th version of it. It's kind of always stayed very similar, but it's always updated itself. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. What I like to see, like in the PlayStation 5, is I like to see like a touchscreen inside the controller. So if I ever have to go portable, I can just take my controller with me. I can play the game right on like a little LCD screen on there, or for whatever they decide for a screen. But I can play it around the screen there while I'm sitting here looking at my controller. To me, that'd be the perfect handheld
Yeah.
because I've had a PSP, and the PSP only had one analog thing stick that really never really really turned me on the system. And I have a Vita. I don't really play my Vita a whole lot, but the one thing I love about my Vita is it doesn't have all the buttons that a PlayStation 4 controller would have. It's got this little touchscreen on the back, which isn't too bad. But the fact is, I can play my Vita on my I can play my PlayStation 4 on my Vita. So if I'm upstairs and I'm in the middle of the night, I don't want to wake my wife up, and I don't want to wake the dog up, so I don't have to take the dog out to go potty. I can just sit there and I can fire up my PlayStation 4 and play my PlayStation 4 in my bed, and that's really nice. So I think if we do the controller route, that's the only way to really make it portable and keep the console system home by itself and not have like some big screen that we have to take out,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and that's a whole nother thing to solve is how would you get the games from console to console, from the home console to the home unit or to the portable unit. So that would be an interesting thing for them to figure out. But we are just about out of time, so we're gonna have to wrap this up. But yeah, I mean, so just a real quick wrap up on your end. So what are you thinking of? What are your thoughts of the current console generation? You think it's positive, negative, or what do you think is the big thing with it?
I think as far as the hardcore gaming crowd goes, and most gamers, I think it's pretty negative. I feel like we never got a lot of original titles for it. We got way too much remake for it. Also, way too much digital, not enough physical for it. And like you said, loot crates. Loot crates really kind of damage reputation. I think we'll look back at the point in this generation and say to ourselves, this is when they stopped making physical games. You know what I mean? Because I can see the next generation of video gaming not have physical games. And then this is when it really came into view. And I'm not saying I'm against digital games, because every now and then PlayStation Store has some sweet sales for digital games. And some companies do make a physical copy, but it's for collectors, us retro players, we do appreciate having the box and manual and the game itself, But I think this is the beginning of the end for physical copies.
Now, what do you think as far as like consoles? Do you think this is going to be the end of consoles? Because we're seeing a link into where, honestly, PC gaming is really becoming affordable, and we're getting the same games across. With the exception of a few, like there's Killer Instinct for Xbox, there's God of War for PlayStation. Outside of those, do you think there's a need for another console generation?
I think yes. For now, yes. I think a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox, whatever they're going to call it after this, I think yes, there is a need for it though. PC gaming is far superior. I'm not saying it's not, but the problem is though, is PC games, a lot of them have a lot of not lag issues, but have a lot. Some of the games are really super buggy. I'm not saying any console games are buggy themselves, but as far as PC versus console games, as far as the records are concerned, I feel like PC games will probably have more issues than the console version. Once PC cleans up its act, or the developers clean up their act, I should say, for PC games, where they start releasing games that are finished and there's no bugs, whatever, and then look to see how beautiful they are and how immersive they are, then I can see the console slowly dying off once they get a better reputation from the developers.
Yeah, I mean, that's because there was that Batman game that came out for like all platforms, and they actually ended up having to pull the PC version from Steam because it was just broken.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know if I would say this was a positive view on the current generation of consoles. I don't know if it's just that I'm an old dude or that I just don't have enough experience on the current consoles. But it seems to me like at least from all the reports and everything that I've seen, it's generally been a negative view on these consoles. But like I said, to somebody, these are their first, one of these consoles is their first console, and they're always going to love it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying I hate this generation. There's a lot of fun for it. I play my PlayStation 4 constantly. There's got a lot of great games for it though, but it's the little things that really take you off. I remember when PlayStation 4 came out and they offered the new Assassin's Creed for it, and the Assassin's Creed game was bugged out really bad right away off the bat. And that was like the big AAA launch title for it. That was the one that's supposed to make people go out and buy the system, and then they had all those issues with it. It's not the fact that the games suck; it's just the fact that we feel like we're not getting our money's worth.
Yeah, I would say it's not that people hate the consoles. I think that it's they just wanted a little bit more consistency and things like that. It's that people love the consoles or love these games or love the franchises, and they want them to do good, and that's why you get people that are kind of upset about things not happening.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and we come from a generation where if a game was broken, it had an instant bad reputation to it. Nowadays, they put a game out that's broken, and then they fix a patch later. But if you're one of the hardcore fans that want to buy on release date, you owe it to your fans to put out something complete. You do not give them like a half fixed project there. You know what I mean?
Okay. Well, on that note, maybe that was a little bit of a bummer. I don't know. But on that note,
sorry, I'm getting on a bad note on this one, didn't we? Yeah.
But we're going to wrap it up, guys. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching on the replay, guys, thank you. Everybody that's subscribed, thank you. Bill, where can they find you on YouTube?
They can find me at Bill Benton on YouTube, man. You can find me. I'm the big ball guy on there. Always willing to check out, make new videos here. We'll have new videos coming out this weekend that I'm working on, so look forward to that.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you on the next Retro Reprise.